We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America.
Hi, my name is Karen Wentz, and I would like to welcome you to the Oakland County Circuit Court and Probate Court Constitution Day program. We are so excited that you are joining us today to celebrate the signing of our United States Constitution and to honor those documents that give us our essential rights. Today I'm standing outside of the Oakland County Courthouse located in Pontiac, Michigan. This building is home to 20 circuit court judges, 4 probate court judges, and over 400 employees. The circuit court is divided between the Civil Criminal Division and the Family Division. The probate court includes the Mental Health Unit, Guardianship and Conservatorship Unit, and Wills and Trust Unit. The essential mission of this court is to advance the administration of justice in a fair and impartial way to ensure that the rights of the citizens it serves are safeguarded. As a constant reminder of that mission, a statue of Lady Justice stands eloquently in front of the courthouse, welcoming visitors each day to our courts. She holds the scales of justice in her left hand, which measures the strengths of a case's support and opposition. In her right hand is a double-edged sword that symbolizes the power of reason and justice, which may be exercised either for or against any party. Her blindfold represents objectivity, in that justice is blind and impartial, and should be apportioned out objectively without fear or favor, regardless of one's identity, money, power, or weakness. Today we celebrate Constitution Day, but why do we celebrate it and what makes it so important? The United States of America has created a form of government that is of the people and by the people. This means that you play a role in our government. And in order for our government to be effective, it requires that we all know and understand how we should be governed. The Constitution serves as our guide, and today serves as a reminder for all citizens to become better acquainted with the document as the framework for our nation's governance. Only by knowing our freedoms and rights are we able to safeguard and understand the boundaries of what's permissible can we protect this union that was created over 200 years ago. In today's program, you'll have an opportunity to meet some of our judges and court staff who will remind us of the significance and history of this day. An entertaining quiz bowl with a special guest will test your knowledge of the Constitution and supporting documents. It is our hope that this program gives you a better understanding of the importance of this day and a reminder that our freedoms are precious. And since you are the next generation to protect the rights that so many people before you have fought tirelessly to preserve, you need to be knowledgeable and vigilant to defend those freedoms and rights for generations to come. Thank you for being a part of our program today. May God bless you, and may God bless America.
Welcome to the Oakland County Sixth Circuit Court's Constitution Day program. On behalf of the Circuit and Probate Court judges, we would like to take this opportunity to thank you for participating today, and we are very excited for all of you to join us during this special event. My name is Judge Kamisha Gant.
And I'm Judge Jacob James Cunningham.
Constitution Day is the anniversary of the formation and signing of the Constitution by 39 brave men we call delegates during the Constitutional Convention on September 17th of 1787 in Philadelphia. During the Constitutional Convention, there were many drafts and revisions to the Constitution, which established America's national government, fundamental laws, and guaranteed certain basic rights for its citizens. The Constitutional Convention started on May 25th of 1787 and was adjourned on September 17th of 1787. That's 116 days. Constitution Day recognizes all who were born in the United States or by naturalization and have become citizens.
We are commemorating Patriot Week, which runs from the anniversary of the terrorist attacks on September 11, 2001 through Constitution Day. Patriot Week celebrates our founding first principles from the Declaration of Independence, key documents and speeches that embody those principles, key patriots who embody them, and the flags of our history.
The Declaration of Independence was adopted by the Second Continental Congress meeting in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania on July 4th of 1776. This important document explained and outlined why the 13 colonies went to war with King George in Great Britain and sought an independent government ran for and by the people. Issuing the Declaration of Independence was the first important step in establishing the country we now know and call the United States of America.
The United States Constitution is made up of 7 articles and frames the government of the United States. Of crucial importance in the Constitution is the separation of powers outlined in Articles 1, the legislative branch, Article 2, the executive branch, and Article 3, the judicial branch. There have been 27 amendments or additions to the Constitution over the years, including 1 amendment to repeal a previous amendment. The first 10 amendments are collectively known as the Bill of Rights, which in essence establishes specific protections for individual liberties and restrictions on the powers of our government against those liberties. The Constitution, especially the Bill of Rights, governs our experience as United States citizens and everyday life in this country. Many of the freedoms we experience and sometimes may take for granted are not allowed or even punishable in other countries. On June 21, 1788, the Constitution became the first official framework of the government of the United States of America when New Hampshire became the 9th of the 13 states to ratify it, making it officially valid. We hope you all enjoyed this experience and learned more about our national and local government.
Hi, I'm Judge Michael Warren of the Oakland County Circuit Court, and it's my pleasure and honor to be here today to discuss with you the foundations of our republic and our freedoms. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That when any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to establish new government, laying its foundation such principles and organizing its powers such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Those words from the Declaration of Independence were revolutionary in 1776, and they remain revolutionary today. And despite the controversy about America and our role on the world stage, we remain a beacon of hope, a torch of liberty, for billions of people across the world. Most people in the world live in countries where they wish their country was more like ours. Think about China and Cuba and North Korea. And some people are so oppressed and downtrodden in their country, they wish to move here. And some people despise us so much that they're willing to blow themselves up just to hurt our innocent civilians. And whether they love us or hate us, they're all motivated by those founding first principles articulated in the Declaration of Independence and embedded in our Constitution. The rule of law, unalienable rights, limited government, the social compact, equality, and the right to alter or abolish an oppressive government. That's what makes America America. It is not TikTok. It is not Instagram or Snapchat or all the stuff that you see in the media sphere today. It's those founding first principles that really define America. So let's just take a second and go through those. The rule of law. Well, what does that mean? That means that we govern ourselves as a society by the duly promulgated laws of the legislature. They're enforced by the executive and interpreted, and we resolve disputes based on that law in the judicial branch. Many other countries in the world in history as well as today, that's not what rules. If you want to see the rule of a dictator, you can look in history. You can see kings and authoritarian regimes and military juntas, or you can even look across the world today. The Communist Party runs China. The law is irrelevant. The communist dictators in Cuba do the same thing. And there's dictatorships all over the world. There's even kings still. And they're not governed by the law. They're governed by their whims, by their personal decisions. So we believe that the law should govern, and that is, again, based on laws that are established by our legislative assemblies, either the state house and state senate or the federal government and Congress, and that they're enforced by the president, the governor, and then interpreted and applied by the Supreme Courts and the judicial courts across the federal and state systems. So that's the rule of law. Unalienable rights, what does that mean? That means that our rights come from the fact that we are people, human beings. They're born within us. We don't go to government and ask the government for our rights. They're born within us. As the Declaration of Independence says, they come from our Creator or nature, and nature is God. Just by being a human being, you are invested with these rights, and you can't give them away. They're in you. They can't be taken away by the government. You don't have to beg the government for our rights. We have them. Again, that's very different than what's across the world. Most people in the world live in countries, I'd say almost every other country, live in countries in which the rights are divvied out by the governments. And it doesn't matter what the people want. It doesn't matter what they think is right. It's the governments that decide what those people can do. And so they're at the mercy of the rulers. That's not what we believe in America. We have freedom of speech, free exercise of religion, right to association, petition the government, the Second Amendment. I can go through all that. Those are born in us, and we have them because of that. So we have the rule of law, unalienable rights, limited government. What does that mean? That means that the scope of government, its power and authority, is limited, and we do that in America through the Constitution. And the Constitution dictates what the government can do and how it can do it. That, again, is very different. It also kind of ties in with the rule of law, right? That's the rule of law. But many governments in the course of human history, and even today, are unlimited. The Chinese government can do whatever it wants. Cuban government can do whatever it wants. The Vietnamese tyranny can do whatever it wants. There's no limits. And we can go through all of world history. That was the same. Think of pharaohs, think of the Romans. We can go on and on. And sometimes it can even be democratic. The French Revolution was based on the will of the people. And they ended up going down the path of the guillotine. We don't believe in that. We believe that the government is limited in what it should do. So we have the rule of law, unlimited government, unalienable rights. The social compact is the next first principle. So that is the idea that the people gather together and create a government to protect our rights. That's the purpose of government. And to be just, the government needs to have the consent of the people to rule. So we have a republic where we vote our representatives in, they pass the laws, and then we abide by them. It's kind of a deal that we're going to do that. If you don't have a government, then what you have is what Thomas Hobbes, the old English philosopher, referred to as the war of all against all. And what that means is in the state of nature, there's no government to protect you, so if somebody tries to rob you or invade your house or whatever, you have the right to defend yourself, and then you have to exact justice by yourself. There's no police force, there's no fire department. So that is what we would call vigilante justice. Somebody takes your things, you chase them down, you beat them up, you measure out the punishment you think is appropriate and leave. That's very, very dangerous. That becomes mobs and lynchings and all those other kinds of terrible ways of adjudicating justice. That's a rotten way to live your life. And as Hobbes said, a war of all against all. So we don't agree with that. We've created a social compact to protect our unalienable rights. That's why you have a government. And to be a just government, the people have to have consent to the government and what it does. So we have unalienable rights, limited government, the social compact, the rule of law, equality. Equality was not something that we actually embraced practically when we declared independence. We said there was this ideal, but we all know there were slaves. Women had no rights. There were Native Americans that were oppressed. Men that didn't own property didn't have the right to vote. So it was very complicated. We set out that principle. It was in the Declaration of Independence, but we were hypocrites. And let's face it, that's what happened. But that idea of equality drove our society tremendously. What happened was those that were arguing for abolitionism, for the elimination of slavery, for the enfranchisement of women, for the equality of races, what they said was, look at those words in the Declaration of Independence. How can you say that you believe in equality when you have slaves, when you treat racial minorities and religious minorities terribly, etc.? And the country woke up and said, you're right. It was a terrible struggle over many generations, but we have come a long way. So equality is one of those founding first principles that we believe in. And the last one, and one that gets some people all excited, is that we have the right to abolish or reform a government if it is oppressive. So the Declaration of Independence said that is an inherent right in everyone. That if you have a government that has gone through a long train of abuses and usurpations of your rights, you shouldn't do it lightly. You just don't do it whenever you feel like it. There's a long pattern of years upon years of oppression that the people have the right to revolt or to reform the government. Now, we've constitutionalized that in our Constitution. We have the right to amend the Constitution and our laws. We have the right to elect new people to Congress and to the presidency and to governorships and other local officials. So we've embedded in the very idea of how we govern our country the right to abolish or reform our government. But of course, the Declaration of Independence took that very seriously. They said, we're declaring independence from the oppression of British tyranny, and we do so because we have, as a founding first principle, the right to do that, because there was a long train of abuses and usurpations that undermined the rights of the people. So, we have now developed a constitution that embodies all those ideals, those founding first principles. First off, I said the rule of law, and I mentioned this before, but the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. It governs everything. And that's fundamentally important that we follow the law. And America was the first place to ever write down what the Constitution was. There was a Constitution in England, but it wasn't written. At other places, the kings just did whatever they wanted. The military juntas governed how they wanted. And we said, no, we're going to put our fundamental understanding of the government in writing for everyone to read and to be held accountable to. Unalienable rights. We've protected those through our Bill of Rights and other protections in the Constitution. So in the First Amendment, for example, we have the free exercise of religion. We do not establish a state church. We have the right to free speech, the right to free press, to associate with each other, to petition our government if there's to address grievances. We have a right to bear arms. We have a right not to have soldiers living in our homes. We have the right to not be challenged in connection with searches by the government or seizures, grabbing you off the street, unless they have a good faith basis, reasonable cause, probable cause to do that, and a search warrant. The right to not incriminate yourself. There's a whole slew of rights that are embodied in the Bill of Rights, as well as others throughout the Constitution in the federal government. And we have a state constitution, which has a Declaration of Rights, which also protects our unalienable rights. So that's key to us. The social compact is embodied in the Constitution. We didn't just have it imposed on us. There wasn't a king or dictator who said, here you are, this is it. We had a series of ratifying conventions in the different states where the people elected representatives to constitutional conventions, and then they adopted as the governing document for the United States of America that Constitution, the federal Constitution, which we're celebrating as we have this commemoration today. And the states all have constitutions which have been ratified by the people of their states. So there's a real social compact. It's not just some kind of pie in the sky, some kind of ideal. We actually do it. And that's very different. It was the first in the course of human history, our country was, to be able to embody that. Limited government. Again, the Constitution could simply say, the king rules. Whatever he wants, that's it. Or whoever wins the presidency, he's a dictator. He gets to do whatever he wants. Or whoever wins the congressional elections, they have unfettered power, which is what happened in France during the French Revolution. We've said no. Even when we have people that have won elections and are in charge and have these fundamentally important positions of power, that we are going to have a limited government. And we do that in many different ways. First off, we chop the government up. We have 3 branches of government. We were the first people that really had 3 fundamentally different and separated branches of government. We have a legislative branch, which is embodied in the Congress, and we even divide that up. We don't want a single assembly making all the decisions. So we have a Senate and we have a House of Representatives. and they pass the law. Then we have the executive, which is embodied in the president, who enforces the law. Then we have a Supreme Court and other lower courts, which interpret what the law is if there's a dispute about that, and resolves disputes about the law. And they also have this enormous, fabulous power, which no other country ever had, in which the court says if there is a violation of the Constitution by the president or the Congress in either passing law or some kind of executive action, he has the right to strike that down. That's called judicial review. And that division ensures the integrity of the Constitution. Then we also have check and balances between the branches. So Congress can pass a law, but the president can veto it. But if there's enough support in Congress for the law, they can override the veto. We've talked about judicial review. That's a check on both the legislative and executive branches. But there's other kinds of checks within the federal government. President can only serve for 2 terms. We don't want to have a dictator that kind of, a demagogue that's just taking power over and over again. On the other hand, the Supreme Court and the federal courts serve for life. Personally, I think we might want to look at that because that's pretty crazy. The life tenure was something that was instituted when people didn't live as long as we do now, but it's intended to insulate the federal judiciary from political pressures. So if somebody makes a controversial decision, the tweet mob goes crazy, the Facebook people go nuts, it doesn't matter. It may be controversial, unpopular, but if it's the right decision, the court needs to be insulated from any kind of ramifications. The legislative branch also has checks and balances. The senators, they only serve for 6-year terms. The House of Representatives only serve for 2. Again, the president can veto them. All kinds of, it's like a clock. And all the different pieces have to work together to pass any kind of legislation and to keep it in effect. So that's fundamentally important. We also divide up the government between the federal government and all the states. And most people don't really understand this, and I think this is an important point to highlight. The states aren't simply laboratories of democracy, which is what, there's a famous footnote that talks about the laboratories of democracy in a Supreme Court decision. There is a fundamental division between what the federal government is supposed to do and what the state government is supposed to do. So the federal government has this doctrine called enumerated powers. And enumerated powers means that the government only has the powers that are specifically listed or expressed in the Constitution. And you can read what they are, it's a very limited list, and that's it. So it's things like creating an army, having a navy, regulating interstate commerce, spending money for the welfare of the country, those kinds of things. It is the postal service. It's very limited. And then everything else is reserved to the states. So in your day-to-day life, yes, there are some contacts with the federal government, but the reality is most of what you do, most of the regulations that you face are promulgated by the states. So that doctrine of enumerated powers goes with and pairs up with federalism. And the great thing about federalism is it's a hedge against tyranny of the federal government. Because if the federal government gets too big, the states can fight with them. They go over their enumerated powers and try to encroach the authority of the states. We have this built-in tension where the states can fight. And then, since we have 50 states, if you're unhappy with what's going on in your state, you can move to another state. And you see this all the time. People that of certain political persuasions may say, I want to live in Texas, because they have one perspective. And others might say, no, I would rather live in California or in New York. And people go to the places that suit their needs and suit their ideologies because they have that ability. Other places, they don't even call it a federal government, there's a national government, and it rules everybody the same way. America's very diverse. We have Alaska, we have Massachusetts, we have Michigan, we have Pennsylvania, we have Texas, we have Hawaii, we have Idaho. What works in one place may not work in another place. So we really want to restrain the ability of the federal government just to impose a one-size-fits-all solution on everybody. So federalism keeps people that are in power accountable to the folks that are closer to them. So if you only can affect a policy in Washington, D.C., your vote is very diluted. But if you're in Michigan or Pennsylvania, and you can go to your local capital or to your city council person or to your county person, they're going to be much more accountable. Equality has been protected in our federal Constitution. First off, let's acknowledge it. It wasn't protected for everyone at the beginning. There was the infamous 3/5 clause. It didn't really preserve slavery as a constitutional function, but it also didn't eliminate slavery. And that's a very long conversation. But eventually we passed the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery, the 14th Amendment, which ensures equal protection of the laws and for everyone, and the 15th Amendment, which gave black men the right to vote. Then the 19th Amendment came along, and we gave all women the right to vote. And so now we have a system in our Constitution which is supposed to treat everyone equally. That's embedded, took a tremendous amount of effort, a lot of lives and treasure were lost to be able to do that, but it is a fundamental principle of our Constitution today, that everyone should be treated equally under the law, regardless of their ethnicity, their religion, their race. It's a key component. And then the last is the right to revolution. And I mentioned this before. You can amend the Constitution. We have these elections that are going on every 2 years or 6 years, depending who it is, or 4 years, depending which office is at stake. So all those abilities of the people to engage with the government, in essence, channels the right to revolution so that we don't have to have a revolt every 20 years with bloodshed. We can make changes at the ballot box to ensure that the people's will is being heard. We have a phenomenal Constitution. I think it's really not appreciated as much as it should be. And we have to remember that the Constitution at the time was a tremendous leap forward in connection with our freedoms and liberties. There was no other country in the world that believed in our founding first principles and then actually put them into the Declaration of Independence and then put them into a constitution that governed the country. We are the heirs of those amazing accomplishments. And we're not perfect. We understand that. But we strive for a more perfect union. And over the last 200 plus years, Americans have taken that seriously, and instead of trying to tear down the system and start, a communist dictatorship or some kind of other system that's not embodied in our does not embody our founding first principles. Instead, we have worked within them to be able to change to be a more just and free society. As you continue through your journey in Constitution Day, keep in the back of your mind that you are now the heir of that great legacy. And there is no way that we can preserve our freedoms and liberty if you don't understand our Constitution and our Declaration of Independence, and you don't work each and every day to ensure that they are protected. God bless you, and God bless America.
Hi everyone, my name is Lindsay, and I am so excited that I get to talk to you a little bit about our Constitution today and why it is so important. Our Constitution was created during the Constitutional Convention in 1787. It happened from May through September. 55 delegates met together in Philadelphia and hashed it out in the heat of summer. Not a lot of them were friends, but they came together, bridged the divide, and created the document that became the foundation of our country. There are 27 amendments to the Constitution, but today I'm only going to talk to you about 2 of them. The first being our First Amendment, the right to a freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and freedom of assembly and association. And the other is going to be our Sixth Amendment, which is the right to confront witnesses against you in open court. Okay, so freedom of speech. Here in this country, we all have phones, and they're great, and we get to talk to our friends and text them and post on social media pretty much whatever we want. And the reason we're able to do that is because of freedom of speech. We don't have to worry about the government coming after us or punishing us or censoring us because of this great amendment. Freedom of religion. You can believe in God, you cannot believe in God, and you don't have to worry about the government coming after you or telling you what to believe, and you also don't have to worry about the government telling you to do something that would be against your religious beliefs because of freedom of religion. Freedom of assembly and association. If you don't like something in our country, you have the right, and maybe you and along with some other peers that agree with you are able to get together and express your opinion on that subject, whatever it is, without the worry of the government coming and silencing you or punishing you. And that is because of freedom of assembly and association, which is part of the First Amendment. Okay, let's talk about the Sixth Amendment. Here in our country, you are presumed innocent until proven guilty. You have the right to a speedy trial. You have the right to an attorney to represent you and do a good job. You have the right to an impartial jury, which means when they select them, they are going to ask them a lot of different questions to make sure that they are fair on your behalf. You have the right to an impartial judge, which means our judges are not appointed by the government to do their bidding. They are voted in by the citizens of our country. And you are allowed to have your attorney or yourself question the witnesses that have brought the allegations against you. And we have that right because of our Sixth Amendment. Now you might be saying, well, Lindsay, that's great. Thank you for reminding me of all of these wonderful freedoms that we have in our country, or telling me for the first time I didn't know that. But why is that important? Doesn't everybody in the world have these types of rights? Well, actually, no. If you just look at the history over the last 75 years of things that we've learned about in school or heard about our grandparents talk about, there are horrible atrocities that are happening to different citizens of different countries around the world. For example, Nazi Germany. There was no freedom of religion in Nazi Germany. Quite the opposite. You were killed or placed in concentration camps for your religious beliefs or affiliation. In communist China, under Mao, there was no freedom of speech whatsoever. If you were caught speaking against the government or acting against the government, you were caught and publicly tortured or killed, to be set an example of. And in the Soviet Union, there was no Sixth Amendment right, which meant if someone accused you, even anonymously, they could just throw you into what they call the Gulag, which was basically a gross prison / concentration camp, and no one heard from you again. That happened every day in the Soviet Union, and that happened over the last decade. Okay, so that was 75 years ago, Lindsay. Why is that important today? That can't possibly be happening. Those were horrible things that shouldn't have happened. We agree with you. Well, unfortunately, those things are still happening today. I'll give you a few examples. China, for example, we just talked about the Soviet Union and how they had no Sixth Amendment right. Well, in China today, you still do not have a Sixth Amendment right. You are presumed guilty until proven innocent. Also in China, there are many books that are banned. You are not allowed to read them because the government doesn't want you to be exposed to those types of things. There are huge chunks of the internet that the Chinese do not have access to. Specifically, social media accounts. So here in the US, we have Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and YouTube and all of these different platforms that we can use to express ourselves and give our opinions. Well, in China, they have those too, but the government created their own version of them so that when people post on them, they can actually monitor what people are saying, and they can find you if you say anything against the government and try to punish you. In Saudi Arabia, women are still treated as second-class citizens. They have severely less rights than men, and that is still the case in Saudi Arabia today. North Korea, you cannot question the government on pretty much anything. They run your life. They tell you what to do for a living. They tell you what time you can leave your house, what time you need to be back to your house. They monitor and track your whereabouts. And if you have a problem with that or you go against that plan that the government has for everyone, then you can be killed or placed in a concentration camp. These are just a few examples of many different countries around the world that live in a country that has a government that is much different than ours. I hope this shows why our Constitution is so important and the rights that it gives us should not be taken advantage of. Our country may not be perfect by any stretch, but it's based on the idea of freedom and individual rights. I hope you have a new appreciation for our country, our Constitution, and the amazing freedoms that it gives us. Please don't take advantage of it. Read it. Learn it, know your freedoms, and work to protect them. Thanks.
To start a new nation in 1781, our forefathers brought forth onto this land the Articles of Confederation to outline our government. This was the start of something so grand. In 1787, the U.S. Constitution was signed. In 1789, the federal government began its formal operation. It established a chief executive and gave taxing power, and created this great court system for our new nation. 27 amendments were added on. The first 10 I wrote are original Bill of Rights. Never in history has there been a doctrine so strong for which our armed forces serve and fight. The Congress, the Federalists, and yes, me, James Madison too, we all played a very key role. But one thing we just didn't have back then: the Oakland County Constitution Day Quiz Ball! The quiz Quiz Bowl is upon us. These simple rules, 10 questions. Please listen. With haste, you will have 10 seconds. Write down your answers. They are in the question. You will hear from the Honorable Judge McDonald, who will provide the correct answers for you. Test your knowledge. Quiz your friends. Our Constitution holds us true. Question number 1. The Constitution of the United States is the longest written constitution of any major government in the world. True or false?
The answer is false. It's the shortest constitution. The U.S. Constitution is 4,543 words. However, Brazil's constitution is over 75,000 words. Michigan's constitution dwarfs the United States document with at least 31,000 words.
Question number 2. How many amendments does the Constitution have? A. 10, B. 13, C. 27, or D. 33?
If you answered C, you are correct. There are 27 amendments. The first 10 were ratified on December 15, 1791. The most recent was ratified on May 7, 1992.
Question number 3. The word democracy appears in the Constitution how many times? A. 0, B. 5, C. 12, or D. 15?
The correct answer is A, which is 0 times. The federal government is a representative republic, which means that the people do not vote directly on laws, but elect representatives to Congress, specifically the House of Representatives and the Senate. The president is chosen by the voters of the states through the Electoral College. Federal judges are nominated by the president and confirmed by the U.S. Senate and serve for life.
Question number 4. Who co-founded the National Woman Suffrage Association with Elizabeth Cady Stanton? Was it A. Marilyn Monroe? Was it B. Susan B. Anthony? Or C. Abigail Adams?
The answer is B, Susan B. Anthony. Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony were partners for decades in attempting to gain the right to vote for women. They were the leading lights in the movement and organized the long-term success of the drive for the women's right to vote. However, they both died before the adoption of the amendment that gave women the right to vote.
Question number 5. Who wrote the Declaration of Independence? Was it A. Thomas Jefferson? Was it B. Benjamin Franklin? C. John Adams? Or D. George Washington?
The answer is A, Thomas Jefferson. He was part of a 5-person committee which included Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, Roger Sherman, and Robert Livingston. Adams insisted Jefferson write the first draft. Adams and Franklin had some minor suggestions. The Continental Congress significantly revised the draft, including deleting a passage condemning the slave trade.
Question number 6. What is the Bill of Rights? Is it A, the first 10 amendments, B, the Declaration of Independence, or C, the Articles of Confederation?
If you said A, you are correct. The first 10 amendments to the Constitution. The First Amendment guarantees the free exercise of religion, bars an established church, and protects the freedoms of speech, press, and assembly, and to petition the government. The Second Amendment protects the right to bear arms. The Third Amendment prohibits the quartering of troops in our homes. The Fourth Amendment prohibits unreasonable searches and seizures and requires a search warrant to search a place or person. The Fifth Amendment protects the right to remain silent, due process of law, and double jeopardy. The Sixth Amendment protects criminal defendants' rights to a speedy trial and public trial, to confront witnesses, and to have a lawyer in a jury trial. The Seventh Amendment protects the right to a jury trial in a civil case. The Eighth Amendment bans cruel and unusual punishment and excessive bail. The Ninth Amendment protects rights that have not been expressly mentioned. The 10th Amendment provides that any powers not given to the federal government is reserved to the states. That is, it ensures enumerated powers in federalism.
Question number 7. The 19th Amendment guarantees which right? Is it A, women's right to vote, B, right to bear arms, or C, freedom of speech?
A is the correct answer, the women's right to vote. It was sent to the states in 1919 and ratified in 1920 and effective August 26, 1920.
Number 8. Students must recite the Pledge of Allegiance during school hours. A, true, B, false, or C, it depends.
This is false. The Supreme Court ruled in 1943 that students who have a religious belief against pledging allegiance cannot be compelled to do so.
Question number 9. How many members are there in the House of Representatives? Is it A, 50? Is it B, 125? C, 435? Or D, 500?
The correct answer is C, which is 435 voting members. Members of the House are allocated by the population of each state, but every state is entitled to at least one member.
Question number 10. When was the final draft of the Constitution signed? Was it A, 1776, B, 1780, C, 1787, or D, 1786?
If you answered C, 1787, you are correct. It was specifically signed on September 17, 1787, which is why we are celebrating Constitution Day today. How well did you know your Constitution Day trivia? To increase your knowledge of the Constitution, check out patriotweek.org. We hope you learned a little bit more about the Constitution, and thank you for participating today.
Thank you for attending our Constitution Day event. My name is Leah Warren, and I am a co-founder of Patriot Week along with my dad, Judge Michael Warren. Today I want to talk to you about something that I'm truly passionate about and conclude today's festivities by telling you a little bit about American history and why it is so important that we not only remember it, but appreciate and protect it every single day. First, I need you to think back to a time when you were 10 years old, and for some of you this might be easier than others. Think back to how you spent your free time, what you found interesting in school, and even what your dreams and aspirations were. When I was 10, my answers were probably pretty close to your own. I loved playing outside, lunch was my favorite class, and all I really wanted to do was become an adult already. But when I was 10 years old, I was also extremely passionate about our nation's history. I was absolutely captivated by the Revolutionary War, how someone could stand up for something they believed in and create a nation founded on the principles of freedom and equality. Their bravery was so astounding to me that it continues to be an inspiration to me today. In 1776, when the Founding Fathers wrote the Declaration of Independence, that action alone was considered to be treasonous and a crime punishable by death. But the fear of losing everything was not enough to stop Founding Fathers like Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, and George Washington, and many others, from making the choice to stand up and say that it was time for the colonies to control their own country and their own future. When Patrick Henry proclaimed, "Give me liberty or give me death," he was absolutely serious. But if we fast forward a few years, the American army, who lacked uniforms, food, and sometimes even weapons, managed to overtake the most powerful and well-equipped army in the entire world. We had finally won our greatest battle, or so it had seemed. Now we had our independence, but we had to form a government completely from scratch. Before the war was over, the Continental Congress wrote up a document called the Articles of Confederation, which was flawed in nearly every way. But as years passed, uprising occurred, and it was obvious that the document needed a few revisions if the country was going to survive. So delegates from 12 of the 13 states met in Philadelphia for 116 days to create what is now the United States Constitution. But in the hustle and bustle of our everyday, it can be really hard to remember the freedoms that we enjoy as U.S. citizens weren't a reality at one point in our history. It is the principles of the Constitution and the founders who wrote it that inspired people of every generation throughout the ages to propose amendments and make social changes. Over the course of every single decade in American history, Americans have protested in the streets and fought in the courts to make America live up to the principles of freedom and equality. Although we are all promised freedom and equality on paper, it took many generations of activism to ensure that that dream is a reality for every U.S. citizen. And we are still fighting that fight today. But the Constitution was never intended to be set in stone, but a living and breathing document of the people who enjoy its privileges. And it is truly ours to protect. The Constitution and the freedom it embodies lie in our hands. And it would be easy for us to go along with our lives and forget everything our history teachers have taught us. But if we wish to be free, we must be willing to remember our nation's past and work to preserve those freedoms for ourselves and for the future. It won't be easy. In fact, history proves it has never been easy. But by joining here today and celebrating the signing of the Constitution, you are already taking that first step. Talk to your friends, your family, and everyone you know about why remembering our nation's history is so important. Tell them about the Constitution and the principles it stands for. Thank our veterans and active service members for serving our country. Research great patriots and share their stories with the world. Even listen to the Hamilton soundtrack. Do something to celebrate our nation's history every day. If you remember one thing from your experiences here today, I want you to remember this: America's future lies in your hands. Thank you.